Every year, people spend billions trying to erase weeds from their yards. Sprays, granules, pre-emergent treatments, perfect lawns treated like a battlefield. And most of the time, we never stop to ask a simple question: what exactly are we killing? Because some of the plants we call weeds are not simple accidents of the lawn. They are chemically complex organisms with long histories in folk medicine, monastery gardens, indigenous healing traditions, and modern laboratory research. That does not mean they replace antibiotics. They do not. If you have a serious infection, fever, deep wound, or worsening symptoms, you need qualified medical care. But it does mean the story is more interesting than weed equals useless. Many common backyard plants contain compounds being studied for antimicrobial, anti-inflammatory, wound-supporting, or immune-related activity. Some grow in sidewalk cracks, some cling to your clothes, some appear in compacted soil, gravel, winter gardens, and places you probably sprayed last spring without a second thought. Today, we are walking through 12 of those plants, not as miracle cures, not as medical instructions, but as a forgotten library growing near our feet. Cleavers, plantain, dandelion, purslane, yarrow, creeping Charlie, and several others. Most people pull before they ever learn their names. By the end, you may still choose to remove some of them, but you will never look at them the same way again. Because before you spray the lawn one more time, you should know what is growing there. Cleavers is the weed that announces itself by grabbing onto you. Walk through tall grass in spring, and suddenly, tiny hooked stems cling to your socks, sleeves, and pant legs, like they are trying to leave the field with you. Most people only know it as sticky weed, but Galium aperine has a much older reputation. In European monastery gardens, it was known as cleaverwort, and used in traditional preparations connected to swollen glands, stagnant fluids, and skin irritation. Traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic practice also recognized similar plants for related purposes. That kind of overlap does not prove a cure, but it does make the plant worth noticing. Cleavers contains iridoid glycosides, tannins, and a compound called asparuloside, all of which have drawn research interest for biological activity. Modern studies are still developing, and this plant should not be treated like a replacement for medical care, but the history is too consistent to dismiss as nothing. The most interesting part is how ordinary it looks. A thin green stem, tiny leaves in whorls, small white flowers. A plant most homeowners pull without hesitation, and yet across cultures, people kept finding a use for it. That is the pattern we will see again and again. The weed was not useless. We simply forgot how to ask what it was doing. Ground elder is the plant many gardeners hate for one very good reason. It spreads like it owns the place. Aegopodium podagraria can move through beds, slip between perennials, and return from root fragments that seem almost impossible to remove completely. In modern gardens, it is often treated as an invasive nuisance. But history tells a stranger story. The Romans are believed to have carried ground elder through parts of Europe as both food and household medicine. They planted it near settlements, monasteries, and military outposts, because young shoots could be eaten as a spring vegetable when fresh greens were scarce. Imagine that. The same plant modern gardeners curse was once moved across an empire on purpose. One compound that has drawn attention in ground elder is falcarinol, a polyacetylene also found in plants like carrots and celery. It has been studied for biological activity, including antibacterial and anti-inflammatory potential in laboratory contexts. That does not make ground elder a home antibiotic, and because it spreads aggressively, nobody should plant it casually. But if it is already growing in your yard, it deserves more than instant dismissal. Sometimes the most troublesome weeds are troublesome because they are powerful survivors. And power, in plants, often comes with chemistry. Self-heal is one of the few weeds whose name tells you exactly how people once viewed it. Prunella vulgaris grows low to the ground, with small purple flower spikes that most homeowners barely notice before the mower passes over them. It is not dramatic, it does not look powerful, but for centuries, it carried one of the most direct names in herbal history: self-heal. In medieval Europe, it was used in traditional preparations for the throat, mouth, and skin. Indigenous traditions in North America also recognized it as a useful plant. In Chinese herbal medicine, it became known under the name xia ku chao, connected historically with heat, swelling, and gland-related complaints. Again, that history is not the same as clinical proof, but it does show something important. Different cultures kept returning to the same small plant. Modern researchers have identified compounds in self-heal, such as rosmarinic acid and prunellin. Rosmarinic acid is also found in familiar herbs like rosemary and lemon balm. Prunellin has been studied for ways it may affect microbial attachment and biological activity in laboratory settings. That does not mean self-heal should replace antibiotics or professional care. It should not. A serious infection belongs in the hands of a medical professional, but as a backyard plant, self-heal changes the way we define a weed. Because here is a plant that grows quietly in lawns, disturbed soil, and garden edges, carrying centuries of human attention inside a few purple flowers. Most people never see it. They only see something to cut down. But sometimes the smallest plants hold the longest stories. Sheep sorrel is easy to miss until you taste it. Rumex acetosella grows low in poor acidic soil, with small arrow-shaped leaves that look almost delicate compared to tougher lawn weeds. But one bite changes everything. Sharp, sour, almost lemon-like. That flavor comes largely from oxalic acid, which is why sheep sorrel should be treated with respect rather than eaten casually in large amounts. For people with kidney issues, a history of kidney stones, or medical conditions affected by oxalates, this is not a plant to experiment with without professional guidance. But the chemistry does not stop there. Sheep sorrel also contains anthraquinone glycosides and flavonoids, including compounds that have been studied for biological activity in digestive and microbial contexts. Indigenous North American traditions and European folk practices both paid attention to this plant, especially in relation to fevers, digestion, and cooling herbal preparations. Again, that does not turn it into a cure, but it does make the plant more interesting than the average lawn care label suggests. It grows where soil is thin, where grass struggles, where gardeners often assume nothing valuable could be happening. And yet, inside those sour little leaves is a chemical profile that has kept humans curious for centuries. Sheep sorrel reminds us that a weed does not need to look impressive to carry a complicated story. Sometimes the plants growing in the poorest soil are the ones that had to become the most chemically resourceful to survive. Wood sorrel is often mistaken for clover. Small green leaves, a delicate shape, a habit of appearing in cool, damp shade, where many garden plants struggle. But Oxalis acetosella has its own identity and its own long history. The leaves have a clean, sour taste, bright and lemon-like, because they contain oxalic acid. That flavor made wood sorrel useful in older food and folk traditions, especially in places where fresh, acidic plants were valuable before citrus was easy to obtain. Historically, it was also used in simple wound-washing traditions, largely because of its astringent tannins and vitamin C content. But this is where caution matters. A historical wound wash is not the same as modern treatment for a deep wound, infection, or serious skin condition. For anything severe, worsening, painful, or infected, medical care comes first. Still, wood sorrel deserves attention because it shows how ordinary plants once filled many roles at once. Food, sour flavor, seasonal green, folk remedy, and a small source of useful plant compounds. It also behaves almost like a living weather signal. In shade, its leaves open softly during the day and fold as evening arrives, making the plant feel strangely awake. Many people pull it from garden beds because they see only a weed. But look closer, and wood sorrel becomes something else. A quiet woodland plant with chemistry, beauty, and history packed into leaves barely larger than a coin. Plantain may be the most common medicinal weed people step on without noticing, not the banana. Plantago major and Plantago lanceolata, broadleaf plantain and narrowleaf plantain. They grow in compacted soil, along driveways, beside sidewalks, in gravel edges, and in the tired corners of lawns where other plants refuse to cooperate. That alone tells you something. This is a survivor. For centuries, Plantain appeared in European, Anglo-Saxon, and indigenous herbal traditions, especially in relation to minor skin irritation, insect bites, and everyday outdoor injuries. Some old texts treated it almost like a living field bandage. Modern research has identified compounds such as aucubin and allantoin in plantain. Aucubin belongs to a class of iridoid glycosides that has drawn attention for biological activity. Allantoin is well known in skincare science for supporting the appearance and comfort of irritated skin. But this needs to be said clearly. A backyard leaf is not a substitute for medical care. Deep wounds, animal bites, spreading redness, fever, pus, or serious infection require a doctor. Still, plantain deserves respect, because the plant most people crush under their shoes was once one of the first plants humans reached for when the skin met the rough world. And maybe that is why it grows where people walk, right at the edge of daily life. Dandelion may be the most hated flower in American lawn culture. Taraxacum officinale grows through turf, cracks, edges, and neglected corners, with a stubbornness that drives homeowners crazy. So people spray it, pull it, dig it out, spend money trying to erase every yellow bloom before it turns into seed. But for most of human history, dandelion was not treated like trash. It was food. It was bitter spring medicine. It was a plant people used in traditions connected to digestion, bile flow, liver support, and seasonal cleansing. Modern research has identified several interesting compounds in dandelion, including bitter constituents, polyphenols, and inulin, a prebiotic fiber concentrated especially in the root. Inulin helps feed beneficial gut bacteria, which is one reason dandelion remains interesting to researchers studying digestion and microbiome health. But dandelion is not a miracle cure. It should not replace medical treatment. And anyone with gallbladder disease, liver conditions, allergies to plants in the daisy family, or who takes prescription medication should speak with a qualified professional before using it intentionally. Still, the larger point remains powerful. The plant many people spend money killing is edible from flower to leaf to root, when harvested from clean, unsprayed areas and properly identified. That does not mean every lawn should become a dandelion field. It means maybe we should hesitate before calling one of the most useful plants in the yard worthless. Purslane is the weed America keeps pulling, while much of the world keeps eating. Portulaca oleracea grows low across garden beds, sidewalks, farm edges, and warm summer soil after rain. Its stems are fleshy, its leaves are small and succulent, and to many homeowners, it looks like something that should be removed immediately. But in Greece, Turkey, Mexico, the Middle East, and parts of Asia, purslane has been treated as food for centuries. That alone should make us pause. This plant is unusually rich for a common weed. It contains plant-based omega-3 fatty acids, minerals, antioxidants, and mucilaginous compounds that give the stems that slippery texture when eaten raw. Some research has explored purslane polysaccharides and their possible relationship to bacterial biofilms, but that science is still developing. It is not accurate to call purslane a replacement for antibiotics. What it clearly is, though, is a nutritious edible plant when properly identified and harvested from clean, unsprayed ground. The flavor is slightly salty, lightly sour, and crisp, almost like cucumber mixed with lemon. It can be eaten raw in salads or cooked briefly with garlic and olive oil. Purslane teaches a strange lesson. Sometimes the plant we call invasive is only unwanted because we forgot it was food. Chickweed is the winter weed that refuses to sleep. When many plants disappear, Stellaria media keeps growing in cool soil, damp corners, vegetable beds, and shaded edges where the season still feels half frozen. Small leaves, tender stems, tiny white star-shaped flowers. It looks fragile, but it often appears when almost everything else has gone quiet. That is why older herbal traditions paid attention to it. In folk practice, chickweed was often associated with cooling, soothing, and minor skin-related uses. Appalachian households used it in simple topical preparations, and European herbals recorded it as a soft green plant for irritated skin and spring cleansing traditions. Modern research has identified saponins, flavonoids, phenolic compounds, and other plant chemicals in chickweed. Some studies have examined its antioxidant, antimicrobial, and wound-related activity in laboratory settings. But laboratory activity is not the same as treating a real infection. A boil, abscess, spreading redness, fever, or deep wound is not something to handle with backyard plants. That belongs to medical care. Still, chickweed deserves a different kind of respect. It is edible when properly identified and harvested from clean, unsprayed ground. The taste is mild, green, and tender, almost like a soft young corn or fresh spring lettuce. And maybe that is the real lesson. Some weeds do not announce themselves with thorns or bitterness. Some arrive quietly in winter, carrying chemistry, food value, and centuries of attention inside a plant most people pull before spring even begins. Stinging nettle protects itself like a plant wearing armor. Urtica dioica is covered in tiny hollow hairs that can inject irritating compounds into the skin, creating the sharp, burning sting most people remember after touching it once. That sting is why many gardeners hate it, but it is also why the plant survives. Animals avoid it, people avoid it, and entire patches remain standing long enough to build one of the most nutrient-rich wild greens in the temperate world. For centuries, stinging nettle was used as food, fiber, and traditional herb. Europeans cooked it into soups and greens. Its stems were processed into strong fibers. Herbal traditions paid attention to the leaves and roots for many different reasons. Modern analysis shows nettle contains minerals, chlorophyll, flavonoids, and other compounds that continue to interest researchers. But this plant needs respect. Do not grab it barehanded. Do not eat it raw unless you know exactly how it has been processed. Heat or drying removes the sting, which is why traditional nettle soup and cooked greens are safe when prepared correctly. And no, nettle should not be used to treat serious infections at home. That is not the lesson here. The lesson is that the plant people fear touching has been feeding and serving humans for a very long time. Sometimes the most defended weeds are defending something worth understanding. Yarrow carries one of the oldest reputations in herbal history. Achillea millefolium, the soldier's herb, the wound plant. The name itself points back to Achilles, the warrior of Greek legend, whose soldiers were said to use yarrow on battlefield injuries. Whether every detail of that story is history or myth, the pattern is real. Across Europe, Asia, and North America, people reached for this same plant again and again. Feathery leaves, flat clusters of tiny white or pale flowers, a scent somewhere between wild sage and warm camphor. Yarrow became associated with blood, skin, fever, and wounds because it was available, aromatic, and biologically active. Modern research has identified compounds in yarrow such as flavonoids, volatile oils, sesquiterpene lactones, and other plant chemicals that have been studied for antimicrobial and anti-inflammatory effects. Some laboratory studies show activity against certain bacteria, but that does not mean yarrow replaces antibiotics. It does not. A deep wound, spreading redness, fever, severe pain, or suspected infection needs medical care. No backyard plant should delay that. Still, yarrow deserves respect because it reminds us how closely ancient people watched plants. They did not separate food, medicine, battlefield survival, and daily life the way we do now. A plant was judged by what it did over generations, and yarrow kept its place. Maybe the lesson is not that every old story is proof. Maybe the lesson is that some plants were remembered for a reason. Yarrow is not just another weed at the edge of a field. It is a survivor with a history written in battlefields, gardens, and the careful observations of people who could not afford to ignore what worked. Creeping Charlie is the weed that refuses to disappear. Glechoma hederacha. Ground ivy. Alahoof. Gill over the ground. It creeps through lawns, slips into garden beds, roots at every node, and comes back after mowing, pulling, neglect, and sometimes even chemical treatment. To most homeowners, it is pure frustration, but history gives it another identity. Before hops became the dominant bittering and preserving plant in beer, Creeping Charlie was used in parts of Europe to flavor and clarify ale. That is where the old name alehoof comes from. People were not using it because it was pretty. They were using it because it had strong aromatic chemistry. Creeping Charlie contains compounds such as ursolic acid, volatile oils, tannins, and polysaccharides that have drawn research interest for biological activity. Some of those compounds are also found in better-known herbs like rosemary, sage, and apple skins. That does not mean Creeping Charlie is a cure for wounds, ulcers, or infection. It is not something to use as a substitute for medical treatment. But it does explain why older cultures did not treat this plant as useless. They noticed its bitterness, its aroma, its persistence, its ability to survive where other plants failed, and they found ways to work with it. Today, most people only see the invasion, the runners, the lawn problem, the patch that keeps returning. But maybe that survival is part of the story. Creeping Charlie is not easy to kill because it was built to endure. And plants built to endure often carry chemistry worth understanding before we erase them completely. The weeds in your yard are not automatically medicine. They are not automatically safe, and they are not a replacement for doctors, antibiotics, or real medical treatment when something serious is happening. But they are also not automatically worthless. That is the point. Cleavers clinging to your clothes, plantain growing in compacted soil, dandelion rising through a perfect lawn, purslane spreading after summer rain, chickweed staying green when the garden sleeps, nettle defending itself with fire, yarrow carrying battlefield stories, Creeping Charlie returning no matter how many times people try to erase it. These plants are not random green accidents. They are living chemistry. Some fed people. Some supported old household traditions. Some entered monastery gardens, indigenous knowledge systems, ancient herbals, and modern laboratories. And whether you choose to keep them, eat them, study them, or remove them, they deserve one thing before the spray bottle comes out: recognition. Because the deeper loss is not only the plants, it is the knowledge of what they are, when they appear, what compounds they carry, and why generations before us paid attention. So before you kill every weed in the yard, learn its name. Ask whether it is invasive, edible, toxic, useful, or simply misunderstood. Check whether the soil is clean. Confirm identification. Respect the risks. And remember that nature rarely divides itself into the neat categories we prefer: weed, food, medicine, poison. Sometimes the same plant has lived in all four categories, depending on dose, preparation, place, and knowledge. If this video made you look at your lawn differently, subscribe, because this channel explores the forgotten plants, old knowledge, and modern science hiding in plain sight. And before you go, tell me in the comments, which of these plants is growing in your yard right now? And did you know its name before today? Before you spray the lawn again, learn what is growing there.